Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Adam, and I am a fine art and fashion photographer from England. And I describe my style of photography as very surreal. It's very whimsical, and normally I'm inspired by fairy tales and nature. If you want to have a look at my work online, my website's adambirdphotography.com, or you can check out my Instagram, which is adambirdie. And yeah, I mean, for me with photography, what I love to do is kind of take a bunch of different pictures and kind of blend them all together to create one final standalone piece. And that's essentially what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm going to finish off our photo from yesterday, and then I'm going to be working on a new Harry Potter style photograph.
Very nice. So we're going to pick up with this one. If anyone didn't see it yesterday, he basically masked out the figure in the center, kind of composited the moon together and showed us all that. So I'm excited to see what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, so I'll just give everyone a quick breakdown of what we actually did yesterday. So if I'm going to hide these layers, so this is kind of what I started with, which was the base picture. And essentially what I did was change the composition and crop the picture. That was just so that I can edit a moon in afterwards. So if we go through these layers here, so this step was to just darken the model, and this would help a lot when just bringing the model out from the background. And because I am painting in a new backdrop, this just essentially blended it in really well together. So this was the backdrop that I added in, and I did this by selecting a dark tone from the background and painting it all over. And then what I did was I added noise, just to kind of give it a little bit of texture. And then after that, I edited in a stock overlay of stars. So with this, it was just on a blend mode of screen. And that just meant that it just overlaid on the top really nicely. So here, if I go through, you can see that I added in the moon. And these layers here were just kind of darkening the moon just to kind of help it blend in with the environment. And again, these are just shadows to help the dress blend onto the moon. And again, let me go through. So this was a big change here, and this essentially just darkened the moon completely. And then I added in some clouds and a bit of smoke here just to kind of add it depth, and to also help it all blend together. So yeah, that's where we got to yesterday, and I feel quite happy with that. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is add a texture to the moon just to kind of help it make it look a bit more realistic. So if I go over here, so I'm just opening a picture of an actual moon that I got online. So this is a stock picture, and what I'm going to do is overlay this onto the prop moon that I edited in just to kind of help it look a bit more realistic. So I guess to save time with this, and because it is a dark backdrop, what I'm going to do is just go to my select tool here and the magic wand. And if I just click on the black here, it will do a really good job of just selecting the moon out. So I don't have to go in and manually do that. So I'm going to invert the selection just so I'm going to copy the moon across, and then copy and paste that over to our image. So let me just move that on across.
Are you going to be using a clipping mask to get it to attach to the moon?
Yeah, I think so. I think what I might just start with is I'll just overlay it on the top and just kind of hover over the different blend modes just to see what effects it will have. Usually the kind of effects that I like are soft light or overlay, just because it blends it in really nicely.
Mm-hmm.
But I do normally just go through and I just kind of see what works best.
Yeah, sometimes that can be surprising. Something works really well that you don't typically use, but I use soft light a lot as well.
Yeah, I love using soft light. It's one that I normally go to. So I kind of like the effect that this is having. And because I just want it affecting the moon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it to the moon here.
Also, just wanted to say hi. We got some more people in chat, and also I think it's Marcia is excited for your Harry Potter image. Hello to Robert. Stuart, welcome on in. Good to see everybody.
Awesome. So all I'm doing at the moment is just changing the opacity of this overlay. That just means that I can blend it in as much as I want. Or if I did want it to be a bit more intense, I could just duplicate it again and go through there. So I do kind of like how that's looking.
Yeah, that's a nice texture.
Yeah, it just kind of adds that extra like that extra thing to it to kind of make it look more realistic. So I really like that. I guess the next thing I would do after that is probably just add in a bit more smoke, just to kind of blend all the colors a bit together, because we've got such a dark backdrop and then we've got a really bright subject. So the way I'm going to do that is just add a new layer. And then I'm just going to go through and sample one of these colors here. And then as well, what I normally do is make sure the opacity is quite low. So 20% is normally fine. And as long as I've got a really soft brush, so make sure the hardness is at 0, I will just go over and start painting on over the whole picture. And even on the dress as well, because I don't want anything to look out of place. I want it to all kind of blend in nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that gives some nice control. Lay in chat says this is just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
We also got Edgeside Gaming in chat. Welcome on in, everybody. Also, just a heads up, if there's anybody over watching on YouTube, definitely come over to the Behance chat if you want us to be able to see your comments and join the main chat over here. So typically, how long does one of these pictures take you from start to finish? I'm sure like shooting it is a whole big part of the production and process too, but do you have a general time frame it takes you to complete an image?
Yeah, usually I can spend hours on making a picture. It all just kind of depends on the kind of editing that I'm doing. But usually, yeah, I'd say it takes me at least a minimum of an hour per picture.
Okay, that's actually pretty quick.
Do you think so? I feel like I feel like that's quite a long time. So it's an hour usually, but I think the most part for me isn't so much doing the physical editing. It's just kind of having a play and kind of figuring out what works best.
Yeah.
I kind of normally do like a rough mock-up, and then I will go in and kind of finesse it and kind of just neaten everything up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I paint and draw, so I can spend many hours on a painting and drawing. I don't do a lot of compositing, so I guess I don't have a huge frame of reference, but yeah, I know what you mean. Like the designing part of it, trying to really figure out the composition and what you want to do, that is certainly a long part of the process for me.
Yeah, and me. I feel like that's what takes the most time, is just seeing what works. And then when I've kind of got that rough idea of what I know that I'm going to do, I kind of know the steps I'm taking towards that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. General Kenobi says just finding an image takes an hour. Yeah, I think we've all been there. An hour is ambitious, says Viola. Carol says, you're saving time by not naming layers. Is that the secret?
Yeah, I'm really bad with layers, as you're going to see right now. What I normally do is when I'm really happy with it like this, I will just go ahead and flatten. I know a lot of people kind of don't like to work like that and kind of like to have all those layers there. But for me at this point, I know that I am happy with the overall picture. So I'm fine with that. I don't mind not going back to it. And I kind of just like working on that one layer.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. Like, I don't know, it's kind of partially confidently making a decision. It's good to have confidence in your design choices in that way. But for me, it's almost like the equivalent of having a clean room. Like sometimes when I just merge down layers, like let's say I'm painting a dragon in a big illustration with a bunch of other elements. If I can just merge that into one element rather than have like this whole catalog of layers. I don't know, it's like, it feels more manageable.
I completely relate to that.
Yeah, so I get it.
So here I'm just using the liquify tool, and I don't tend to use the liquify tool that much, but what I am going to do on this is just kind of bring out the dress just so it looks a bit neater, because there are a few like wobbly bits, and I'd rather everything just kind of be straight, and I guess that way it's just less distracting as well for people who are going to be looking at it.
Do you often kind of refine the shapes and proportions and like whatever you want just to kind of fit your vision?
Yeah, usually. I just kind of like lines to be straight, and when I kind of see all these wobbly bits here, it's just something that I would like to edit, and I just think it's that extra detail that I like to do in my pictures.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's one thing I've thought about photo compositing before is I wouldn't like to be too limited by the images I happen to have, but I feel like
Yeah.
Liquify and certain tools really do give you flexibility to manipulate the photo and, you know, in a lot of really controlled ways.
Yeah, there's so much flexibility with it, and it just kind of allows you to, as well, if someone isn't standing a certain way, I can always use a liquify tool to kind of shift that a little bit, and it's just to get that vision that I have in my head. So that is quite small, but for me, that is a big difference, and it's something that I normally do when I finish editing all of my pictures.
Oh, so before you composite, you mean?
No, I normally do liquefying later on.
Okay.
I kind of see that as like a retouching stage. So my kind of idea is to usually do the composition first, and then I'll go through and do retouching, and kind of just tidy up little bits.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do now actually is a dodge and burn method. So what I do like to do is always add a black and white layer to start with. That is just so that when I'm dodging and burning, there's not that distraction of color, and I can just kind of see things a lot clearer when there's no color there, and it's just a lot easier to see what needs to be brighter and what needs to be darker.
Yeah, definitely. It's that value contrast that really defines a lot of the look.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like, this is just a last technique I kind of do on all my pictures, just to kind of give it that finished feel, I guess.
Do you have any thoughts on curves versus levels? I myself actually use levels all the time. I've tried curves before, but it's almost like harder for me to control. But I realize that, you know, it seems like a lot of people really like using it. Do you have a preference for any particular reason?
I think it's just because that's what I've always used. And with curves as well, I like to kind of adjust color tones with it as well. I normally do that in Lightroom afterwards. But I just feel like with curves, that's just something that I've used for so long. It's just kind of second nature to me. I have used levels before, but no, curves is just the one. Curves is the one for me.
Definitely, yeah. Also, Sam DeSan in chat says, I name all my layers, all of them. I never used to. Like, if you look at some of my Photoshop files from, I don't know, like before 2016 or something, it would just be a million unnamed layers, and there's no like hierarchy or structure or folders or anything like that. But lately, I don't know. I like merging things down when I can, and I like organizing them into groups and naming them. And
yeah,
I feel like it does help a lot, and it cuts down on stress for me, but it seems like most people don't name their layers from what I've seen.
no, I did that only because I was probably going to get confused with what was dodge and what was burn.
Yeah.
But usually, no, I don't normally name the layers that I'm using.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it like that, just, you know, as needed.
Yeah.
Biolo is wondering what you're using dodge and burn for.
Oh, so dodge and burn is almost like contouring with makeup, I guess. And it just kind of allows you to bring focus to different parts of the image. So you can make things darker and kind of make it a little bit further away in the background. And I usually find with dodging, it just makes everything, the lighting stand out a lot nicer. Because sometimes I've dodged and burned my pictures, which were shot with natural light, and people kind of guess that it's shot with studio lighting when it's actually just dodge and burn. I feel like it just really enhances like the overall quality of a picture.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I was actually literally just thinking about that the other day. I was like, you know, I never really use dodge and burn, but it is a very quick way to kind of add those effects. And I always use multiply and color dodge. It's like the same purpose.
Yeah.
But I had a specific reason dodge and burn made sense the other day. So I may play around with it because it's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it as well, dodge and burn. So there are actually dodge and burn tools, but because I use curves quite a lot in my work, that is something that I just go to straight away, and that's just because I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd say I'm pretty happy with that picture there. As a whole, I think the next step that I would do is just kind of edit the colors and make the tones a lot nicer. So I normally move on over to Lightroom in this stage. So I'm just going to bring that up now as well. Yeah, and the dodge and burn always helps bring that out as well. So it's definitely something I always try and do on each of just the overall interface that I use. So on the left here is just all the presets that I have. So when I kind of create a picture and I kind of really like the content, and I guess the reason I do that is so much, and it will show you a preview at the top here as well, what it will look like. So these are just some of my favorites. I have to show you actually how to create them.
Yeah.
It's really easy. So basically what I do is just, I will start with the curve tool here. So with the curve tool, what I normally like to do is kind of just bring it down, and it just adds that little bit more contrast to here, just so it's not so harsh. Great, and then you can go in on the individual colors as well. I up the reds and the shadows. But yeah, what I normally do is just go through here, I add all the color tones, and then with the colors here, you can individually alter each color. So any yellows in the picture, you can make sure if they've got a lot of saturation or none at all. And you can also change the hue a little bit. So these yellows would be more orange rather than green. And then the other thing I normally do as well is just play with the highlights here. So you can add individual colors just to the highlights of the picture. And you can also do that with the shadows as well. So again, what I normally try and go for is making it more blue. Just like that. And I'll probably pull this down a little as well.
Yeah, that fits the image really nicely.
Yeah, it kind of just pulls everything together, I think, when I bring it into Lightroom. And then another thing I do as well is I always bring the sharpening up, because I don't tend to sharpen in Photoshop. I normally do it in Lightroom as well. And I will add a little bit of grain as well.
So when you were pulling up the darks a little bit with the values, was that part of getting it to kind of have that painterly feel, not going like super deep darks?
Yeah, I don't like it to be too contrasty. I always kind of like to have the blacks not be completely black, and instead just be a little bit off. I think that's with paintings as well, as when you look at paintings, they've always got some kind of tint to the color. And that is something that I try and replicate with this.
Yeah, that's great. I've seen a tip similar to that before for someone who also has a similar kind of painted look to their photos. And when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's something that I always try and do. I always try and pull up the blacks just so it's not so harsh.
Yeah, it gives it a little softness, which is really nice.
Yeah, and then I guess at that point, I'd be quite happy with this. So if I show you before and after, just with the colors. And then if you do like this preset and you'd like to use it again in different work, you just have to go to the top here and you can save it as a new preset. So you could call it Moon, for example. And then all you'd have to do, if I reset the settings here, you just have to click on it and it would just apply all those settings straight away. So I've got some different presets here as well. So all of these just kind of add different kind of tones to the picture. Let's have a look.
Yeah, it's great to have like a library of those you can apply to whatever image they fit best.
Yeah, and I kind of like having to play around as well. So when I put the preset on, necessarily it's not going to look good straight away. I will kind of just have to tweak it and kind of make adjustments to kind of fit each individual picture. But it's nice having all those colors already there, just so it's easy to work with.
Mm-hmm. Marcia says Lightroom is like magic. And
it really is.
Marcia is also asking, what does sharpening add?
Oh, for the sharpening, let me show you. So if I zoom in, so here is without zero sharpening. And then if I up that, you can kind of just see the kind of clarity it brings to the picture. So what I normally like to do is keep it maybe about 80. I don't normally go higher than that. And this has got quite a lot of grain, so I would probably either bring that down, or I normally keep it around 10 to 20, I'd say, just to kind of give it a bit more texture.
Yeah, it looks like sharpening really like strengthens those edges.
Yeah, I really like the sharpening tool in Lightroom, so I always would add that on as well.
Sam Desan says, I don't use Lightroom much. Do you consider it useful?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Lightroom as well, it's because I shoot a lot of weddings. Lightroom just makes it so easy to batch edit. So I could make a preset for a wedding picture, and then I could apply it to 100 pictures, and then just individually just go through and quickly change the brightness and the highlights and things like that. Um, but in terms of presets, you can also make actions in Photoshop which do a similar thing, and you can build up your layers that way. But I would definitely say if you haven't used Lightroom before, definitely try it. It's just a preference again of mine that I like using. I just find it really fun to play around with, and it's nice to have all the colors and everything there ready to kind of just play around with.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that if you're a photographer, Sam Desan, it's really useful because if you've ever had to edit a bunch of photos from a group and you have to bring each one into Photoshop and edit it, it's very time consuming. But I think where Lightroom really excels is being able to batch edit photos, put a whole
Yeah.
collection together, edit them all, organize them, all that stuff. So if you're working with like a large selection of images that you need to tweak a little bit or anything like that in an organized way, Lightroom's really great for that. This is an interesting one. Divyansh says, my question is, why do so many prefer Lightroom over Camera Raw in Photoshop? Do you think do you have a preference besides the whole like number of photos and batch editing?
No, I wouldn't say so. For me with Lightroom is I shoot a lot of my pictures in JPEG, and it's probably not. I mean, for me, that works. It wouldn't be something that a lot of people would say you have to shoot in RAW. But for me, I've never come across a problem shooting in JPEG. So I've never actually used Camera Raw. Lightroom's always been that one for me as well. I can just quickly import everything and then kind of have a play around with.
Yeah, I think a lot of those tools have some overlapping functions too. I think you just really have to try it out and see if one's kind of lacking the features you really need over the other.
Yeah, I think it's just seeing what works best for you and then kind of getting that editing workflow. There isn't necessarily like a right or wrong program or any right or wrong settings. It's all just having a play around and seeing what you like on each picture, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's something I've seen a lot. Like, if you watch a lot of live streams and different artists and designers work, you realize that everyone kind of has a unique workflow and there's lots of ways to do the same thing. You see that all the time. Like, there's so many different ways to make selections or make, certain color tweaks or anything like that. So I think it's a big part of it is just when you use a lot of these tools frequently, you kind of fall into an area where you find what's comfortable for you, what works with your entire workflow, and what just kind of makes sense to you. So it's a lot of, I think, practice and trial and error for people.
Yeah, I guess it's just experimenting as well. And if something works for you, it might not work for somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, but definitely, I mean, each picture you create, you kind of will get that kind of sense of this is the direction I'm going to take my picture. And you kind of have in your head, this is how I'm going to edit as well. So going from Photoshop to Lightroom is just something that I've always done.
Yeah, and I always like seeing other people work because sometimes they'll talk about a tool that I haven't really used in a while, or I don't really use at all, and I'm like, that's interesting. I'll have to try it out. And sometimes that stuff actually does fall into your workflow after you experiment with it. So it's always good to kind
Yeah.
of play around with tools.
So that is before I took the picture into Lightroom, and that is after. So with that, it just kind of brought a lot more of a blue tone to my picture, and I feel really happy with that. I'd be tempted to probably pull down the opacity just a little.
Yeah, that looks great. That blue tint really does kind of sell that like nighttime moon sky feel.
Yeah, I feel like it just kind of pulls everything together as well. And I kind of just love blue tones. It's something that I always go for. So yeah, I feel like that works really well.
Yeah, and she has this like really warm lighting on her originally, but even though she's still very contrasted compared to everything else, which really makes her a great focal point in the piece, it has like that cool kind of tint of lighting, which works really well. So that's really neat to
Yeah.
see. General Kenobi says if every image is processed in an entirely different way, it's maybe better in Photoshop. Yeah, if you really want to kind of
Yeah.
delve into one image differently than the others, Photoshop's probably a pretty good bet for that.
Yeah, I agree. For my work, I kind of do all my compositing and all my kind of edits to a picture in Photoshop, and Lightroom is just for colors. But I would say it's just I edit each picture individually. So even though I do make presets and I kind of apply them afterwards, they are stuff that I do still adjust them. So it's not just like a one kind of click thing.
Mm-hmm. And then Michelle in chat says, once you've done your composite in Photoshop and then add changes in Lightroom, if you want to go back to Photoshop to work on layers, you won't have access to them if you want to keep Lightroom changes, I think, ?
Yeah, so once you've put it into Lightroom, that's it. It's kind of like a flattened layer. So that is why I'd say it's definitely important to kind of make sure that you're really happy with how the picture looks before you go into the Lightroom. But what I have actually been doing is kind of processing the colors in Lightroom first, bringing it back into Photoshop, and I might even do about 4 or 5 different color variations and then just blend them together in layers.
Oh, okay. That's a really good idea. I mean, you could also, I believe, it sounds like that's a really good thing to do in Lightroom when you're done with the image, but you could also just save different, versions of the image, apply the same preset in Lightroom. So I imagine if you find a preset that you really like, you could save that, make any edits in Photoshop if you need, bring it back, or do it the way Adam just said. So I think there's some flexibility there if you need it. Do you have a difficulty at all, like calling a piece finished? I know that's something a lot of designers and artists have an issue with, like actually calling it done. Or do you find yourself tweaking really small things for a long time?
Yeah, it's weird because some pictures I can feel, yep, that's it. I'm completely settled. I'm really happy with it. And other pictures I will have to just kind of keep coming back to with a fresh pair of eyes. So some pictures I might just leave overnight and then come back the next day and kind of relook at it. And I might think the colors might be too much. But I guess there's never a kind of a way to know if a picture's completely finished. You just kind of get that feeling. And when I know there's not much else I'd want to change, that's when I'm like, right, I should leave it before I overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something you also kind of get a feel for the more you do, like what bar you want to call it done in, and where in your process it's comfortable calling it finished.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say that picture's finished. I'm just going to close it down and then I'll get working on the Harry Potter picture as well.
That looks great. Yeah, love the colors and lighting in this one. And also for the Harry Potter one, are you gonna kind of show that, we're talking about this a little bit before this stream, but the kind of step-by-step process?
Yeah, I'm going to go in and kind of just show what I kind of look for in a picture first, and then show what kind of tools I will use to kind of get that desired effect.
Mm-hmm. You also had some examples, right? You had a few images that kind of show the workflow from the unedited images to the finished ones.
Oh yeah, I'll bring that up now actually. Let me.
Yeah, those were really cool.
Screen.
I think one of my favorite things to see when people are doing these really elaborate edits, whether it's on Instagram or the daily creative challenges or anything, it's seeing that like process from where it started and what they've done. Because sometimes it's kind of a mystery, but it's really cool for that to be shown exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I try and be quite open about the Photoshop work that I do, and a lot of people kind of think of Photoshop and kind of just think of retouching or kind of making people thinner and that kind of thing. But I kind of like to see Photoshop as more of a creative tool. So it's basically like my paintbrush. So I can kind of paint and create my own pictures. And I've got a friend who calls it like a magic camera or like a magic lens. And that's essentially what it is. Photoshop allows me to kind of pull all these bits together to make the picture that I had in my head. So with this picture here, this is a before and after picture that I took is a couple of years ago now. And what I noticed when I was shooting is that I wanted the dress to be a lot fuller than what it was. So with this, I kind of took photos of the dress moving in different directions, knowing that I was going to edit it in afterwards. And with this, it's so hard to get everything right in one shot. So I kind of took pieces from different pictures. So the crown was falling off every time the model ran. So I was like, right, we're going to get a photo with the crown on, and I will just Photoshop that on afterwards. And again, working with natural light, the light was changing so much. So if you can see on the left, there's quite a lot of bright sunlight here in the background. And that's, if you watched yesterday, I was talking about sunlight, and it's something that I try and avoid. So yeah, I just took photos while the light was changing and kind of just brought it all together to make one final picture. And yeah, I wish the dress was that big in person. It just wasn't. It
Yeah,
would have made it a lot easier.
It's really great to see how you take like different elements of successful photos and kind of put them all into one. Are you able to full screen this image to make it a little bit bigger?
Let me bring that up.
Yeah, I love how you enhance the lighting too, like kind of on the left side of the dress and then the very right tail end of it, how you really like made that lighting appear a little bit more kind of vibrant.
Yeah, that was with dodge and burning actually. That was again just kind of, it enhances the light, and that's kind of why I love using it really.
Yeah, that's great.
So here's the next picture that I've got of before and after. And with this is why it's kind of important when you're shooting to kind of think of the editing process. So with this, I knew that I wanted to create an Alice in Wonderland style picture. So I made sure to shoot this from a high up angle, because no amount of Photoshop is going to change the angle of a picture if you shot that from low down. So I got up on a ladder and I made sure to take it high, and then that kind of matched the picture where I was going to put the model into. And again, with this kind of edit, it actually didn't take that long. It was mainly just a case of enlarging the model into the magnifying glass and then kind of shrinking the rest of the model and adding a blur with Photoshop just to kind of give it that natural depth of field. But yeah, I definitely say it's worthwhile thinking while you're shooting how you can edit afterwards.
Was this the same ground plane, or was this like a focused close-up image of the ground that was separate?
Oh, this was, so the photo, it was actually just of a hand with the magnifying glass. And then that was all that was there. So that's its own photo. And then I combined it with the one on the left.
Okay. Paco says great perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to kind of, when you're thinking of stock and kind of matching photos together, it's always to get the angles right, because that's so important when making things look believable. So with this picture here, I mean, I don't have access to a zoo. So I was like, I need Photoshop to magic this into a scene. So what I did before this is I knew that the lighting was actually on the left. So this wall that I wanted to shoot in, the lighting was coming in from the left. So when I was searching for stock pictures online, I had to make sure with the animals that the lighting was from the same direction, just so I can match that really well. And again, yesterday with the masking, and I was using the Wacom tablet, that's what I did here. And it took so long to kind of cut out all the individual hairs just over here. But again, that is the whole thing with Photoshop. There's not like a one click kind of fix for things. You kind of do have to do things manually and go in and kind of take that time to put it together. And then here's another before and after as well. So with this picture, I kind of wanted to give that extra depth, and I'm going to do that on the Harry Potter picture as well, show how I create depth in Photoshop. Because the location didn't look exactly how I wanted, I made sure to take extra photos of the fields to kind of blend in together after. And also I didn't have enough balloons, so I took more photos of the balloons to kind of edit them into.
Yeah, I love the depth you got with the foreground balloons and then the kind of foreground flowers that you added too. The flowers especially really helped this photo.
It's something I do quite a lot with my photos. I always try and add depth so the picture doesn't look so flat. And I feel like it just engages people more as well when they look at it.
Yeah, it almost kind of leads us to her, like from the front balloon, the mid ground, and then straight to her. So that's great.
Yeah, I love that. And with this picture here, this is my last before and after that I have to show. And with this location, there was a flower wall directly opposite. And I was so gutted that it didn't go over this cave. I was like, it would have been so cool. So again, I just took extra photos of the flowers and I thought, I'm going to try and just blend this together in Photoshop. I didn't know if it would work, but it did. And it's just it kind of adds so much more to the picture because it ties the model in with the location, the color of the dress as well. And I just feel like it just complements the picture so well. So my advice to people would always be to take extra pictures of locations or props, because you never know when you can edit them in afterwards and kind of make a final picture out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I love the color contrast too. Her skin really like has that kind of yellow pop against all the purple.
Yeah, and that was done in Lightroom again, just kind of playing with the highlights and the shadows. So I guess on all of these as well, there isn't any direct blacks in the picture. So this is kind of like a bluey, purpley tone. And again, that's just to get that painterly feel.
Yeah, definitely. To manipulate photos or combined is the fun thing that you can do in Photoshop. Robert says, yeah, that's where Photoshop really excels, is that kind of in-depth editing and compositing. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
It's used by, you know, digital painters a lot for painting, and it's used by photo compositors for editing and compositing. And it's like there's kind of like a seamless blend that you could do between those. You know, there's a lot of painters who use photos in their work, and then there's a lot of photographers who, like, you know, use things like the liquify tool, and it's kind of a, you know, it's not necessarily a hard separation between the two, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and there's just so much you can do with it as well. And I always think with Photoshop, the possibilities are endless, and there's always so much you can do to a picture.
Yeah, right. Because I don't think I've ever come across something you can't do in Photoshop. Like if I'm trying to achieve a certain look or someone wants to make a certain edit, it's never like you can't. It's just you have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and it's just knowing the basic tools that you can use, and you can apply them to loads of different things. So in this picture, I'm going to be doing quite a lot actually. So what I normally do is when I start off is I would think, what is it that I want to change about this? So when I shot in this window, there was this big kind of wooden barrel there. It was attached to the building, so I couldn't move it. So what I'm going to do is edit that out. And when I look at this as well, there's a few other things that I would like to edit out. So this light here in the background, I did want it on to kind of give that separation from the subject to the background, just in the hair here. But I am going to edit this out just because I think it's quite distracting to the picture. As well, another thing that I would do is I'd probably edit out this beam here. Just again, because I don't think it kind of adds that much to the picture. I feel like it would be just as strong without it. And then with this picture, with the edit that I've got in mind, I'm going to switch out this prop as well and then edit something else in. And I'd say that's it for this picture. Those are the main things that I've got in mind when I look at it. Other than that, I will probably just get rid of the model's tattoo here, just because I don't feel like it fits the scene completely. I feel like it would just be a lot stronger without it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love this this little hut.
It's so cool. It's a real Hagrid's hut that you can stay in. So I was like, we need to definitely do some pictures here.
Okay, I remember you mentioning the other one. Was it you in front of Hagrid's hut? I think with the lantern.
Yeah, I did a photo in front of Hagrid's hut with a lantern, and this was just on the other side of that. I really wanted to do a shot in the window. So this is of my friend Debbie.
Yeah, and I think you touched on that a little bit yesterday, but I was curious if all the models you use are like people you know, friends and family, or if you actually hire any models for any specific photos.
Yeah, I do work with models. I'm in touch with a few agencies. But a lot of the time, I do love to just shoot with my friends just because it's so relaxed. And this is my friend, Debbie. She's great. And I just thought with this, you know what? It just kind of plays in with the character really well. So I actually brought a couple of dresses along with me to this. And I do have in my car as well. I normally have a bunch of props or dresses or anything on hand just in case I come across a photo opportunity, because you never know.
That's great. I've heard people like driving around with their camera and everything, but never like props. So that's good. You got you got the next level. I mean, it's a great idea. Like, yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
it comes
because
in handy when
you
you need
never
it.
know. Totally. So with this, actually, I felt really lucky because this wasn't planned, but there was actually a vent on this building, which it was like the heating vent. So every now and again, it would kind of let off this smoke into the picture. I was like, I'm going to use that. So I actually use that in the final edit. So what I'm going to do is I've just copied it with the marquee tool on here, and I'm going to paste it into this picture. And I'm just going to kind of overlay it. If I bring down the opacity, you can see it doesn't match up completely. There is a little bit of a variation here. So what I'll do is I will just add a layer mask and invert it. And then if you go to your brush tool and just make sure that you're painting with a 0% hardness, just because it helps everything blend in seamlessly. There we go. And I'm just going to start by just brushing over the picture. And I'm not too worried at the moment about anything not looking right because I will edit that afterwards. But just at the moment, just making sure that all of that smoke is there. Okay. If I zoom on in, you can kind of see in some areas here that it doesn't match up. So I'm just going to erase that. So I'm going to paint with black and just toggle it on and off just to make sure it's all blending well. Which, to be honest, it blends in quite well. And this is why I kind of keep clicking and keep shooting, just because I like to match things up from the same setting.
Do you shoot most of your photos on a tripod?
No, never, unless it's a self-portrait. Wow. But usually I will just keep in the same position, and I have to try and be as still as I can. But yeah, I normally just shoot it just handheld, I guess.
Oh, interesting. Also, hello to Leslie in the chat. Welcome in.
Hello.
I did want to give everyone a heads up. I'm not sure if I said it previously, but in about 45 minutes or so, we will be going over some of the daily creative challenges. So if anyone isn't familiar with that, every day, it's like in 2-week sets, we have challenges. You can check them out by clicking the challenge tab above, and that'll give you kind of all the info you need. But we have a Discord community for it, and then we have a stream every day. So what? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. All I've done here is basically I've just copied this area of the window that's really dark, and I'm going to put it over on this side and just kind of mask it in behind.
I was going to say, were most of your photos from the Harry Potter series taken in like the same location?
No, they've pretty much all been in different locations. So I was really lucky in the fact that I got to stop at this Harry Potter style accommodation. So I shot 2 pictures there, and other places I've either shot in the woods by my house, or I've shot some of them by castles, or actually I managed to get to shoot on a train, and like an old-fashioned train that was in Harry Potter. So I kind of edited that, and I edited the colors to match the scene, and I kind of edited in a different window behind as well.
That's super cool. But Div Yunch asks, did you shoot in full manual or in semi-auto modes when outside?
Oh, I shoot in manual. Again, that's just a thing because I like to be in control of how the picture's going to look. But yeah, I normally shoot in manual, and I always make sure when I'm shooting that I always have a low aperture. And again, that just kind of helps lend itself to the fairy tale vibe because it makes everything super soft. And yeah, that's kind of my go-to when shooting. I always sort out my aperture first, and then I'll just adjust the other settings accordingly. Great. So I've just made a quick selection of the background there, and I'm going to feather it as well just to make it a little bit softer. And because we're on a layer mask too, I'm just going to start by painting on with white. And this just reveals the layer because it was hidden. There we go. So that's done a pretty good job. And what I would probably do here is then just go around really roughly just around the edges to kind of blend that line in.
Oh, and I think this, you said, this is Debbie. I think she's in chat. She said, love this place. So magical. Adam's work is so fun to shoot.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Debbie.
Yeah, it seems like these photo shoots would be a ton of fun.
Yeah, they're so much fun. I mean, you can't really tell that much here, but it was raining quite hard for this. So I was outside in the rain trying to keep my camera dry, and Debbie was inside, nice and dry and warm.
Nice and cozy in Hagrid's hut.
Yeah. So that's just getting rid of the light in the background, just because I didn't want it to be a main focus. And I guess the next thing I would do is probably just get rid of this wooden beam in the middle, because I don't feel like it adds much to the picture. And a way that I would do that again is just copying and pasting. So selecting a big area of the picture and then moving it on over. And you could also do this like with the clone tool and other things like that. But this is just the method that I normally use, is copying and pasting.
Yeah, I like that. That's actually, I mean, it's very simple, but it seems like just the way you mask it gives you a lot of control. Sometimes I almost find it a little hard to control the clone stamp.
Yeah, me too. So this is just a preference, I guess, again.
Also, welcome into Saddam Ahmad in chat. It says they're new here. Glad to have you. Yeah, it's interesting how those little changes like really do draw the attention to her face a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the main thing for this, is that I want the focus to be on the subject and kind of everything else that's going on, and not so much just this random wooden beam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it looks way better without it.
Certainly.
And again, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it certainly makes life easier. I mean, imagine before Photoshop when you just kind of have to deal with what you got from the scene, you know, all the objects, all the things.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be able to edit it out. This just makes it so much easier. And this is the thing with the clone tool, is I much prefer copying and pasting, just because I don't make a mess of it like I just did.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like copy and paste, I don't know. I like it. I do that a lot with things. I just like being able to edit it on a separate layer. And if I mess anything up, you know, I can always copy it from the original photo again.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, just a reminder, if anyone is currently watching on YouTube, if you do want us to see your comments or questions or anything like that, head over to the main chat at behance.net/live, and that's where we're able to see the chat.
Great. Yeah, I feel so much better without having the wooden beam there already. I feel like it just looks a lot nicer already.
Yeah, and everything that is currently in the window frames her very well. Like, you can really kind of see the difference after removing the other objects, that they were just sort of visually distracting compositionally.
Yeah, I always try, and I have altered locations before where I've kind of change the shape of buildings and things like that, just because I don't feel like it makes the picture look that appealing. So with this, I know obviously we needed that beam there, but I just feel like it looks so much better now.
Yeah, I like it.
So I guess the next thing I'd probably do is when I was shooting this, I always like to have options. So I did have this lantern here, but I also tried it out with a book as well. And that's what my kind of idea was with the picture, was to have a book and loads of books kind of flying around. So I'm going to just bring up my other pictures that I've took.
Also, Jessica in chat asks, how did Adam get started in photography? Did he study it in school?
Yeah, well, I got started when I was a teenager, and that the main bit about that was, I guess, my sister, when we were at school, she wanted to have a modeling portfolio, and we couldn't afford one. My parents couldn't afford to have a photographer. So at that point, I had a really small camera, and I said, I'm going to try and take some pictures for you in the garden. And I would just YouTube and have a look on the internet and see how I could edit pictures to make them look better. And at that time, I just kind of overlaid loads of filters, and it looked really bad. But it went really well. Like, people at school would come up to me and ask me how I did it, or if I actually made them and took the pictures. And it kind of led from there. So my school didn't offer photography as an option. And when I kind of said to them, I'm going to go to college and study photography and skip A levels, they kind of were just like, are you sure that's a good idea? And at that point, I was just like, this is what I love doing. And I'd find that when I was at school as well, I wouldn't so much be focusing on anything else, but in my free time, I was just taking pictures. So it's always been there. But I did go to college. I studied photography for 2 years at college. And then, yeah, college for me didn't teach me that much. I think that it gave me the opportunity to practice and kind of take things on my own. And it definitely gave me like the theory side of photography. So we did a lot of projects of researching and things like that. But I'd say the best way to get into photography is just practice, to go out on your own, go out with friends and practice shooting. So you could see if you like shooting with flash or if you prefer shooting with natural light, and just go from there, and even go to workshops and things like that. And I guess the thing for me is just being surrounded by people with the same kind of mindset. So a lot of my friends are photographers, and I met them online, even just through Facebook and things like that. But yeah, I definitely recommend either going to workshops, or just pretty much just invest your time into photography.
Yeah, it's really all about kind of mileage and practice when it comes down to it. I mean, you can learn all the theory and everything, which is definitely helpful, but nothing really beats, the experience of doing it.
Yeah, and did you go to college and study photography or anything like that?
No, I basically went to community college after high school, because after high school I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and
Yeah.
I kind of played around with the idea of going like into film, and then I was kind of thinking, well, special effects specifically in film would be cool, so I kind of looked into doing like 3D, and that kind of made me find my way to art and like drawing and painting. And then after that, I just kind of left the community college because I was taking general ed there. And
Yeah.
I decided not to go to art school, which was the big decision. And so I'm just a lot of like self-taught stuff using online resources and books and practice and all that.
Yeah, and there's so much out there online as well that you can learn from. And just me personally, I don't learn well from being in a classroom. I learn best from physically doing it myself, or just watching other people do stuff. So reading books and stuff isn't kind of how I learn. It's just best for me to, I literally spent so many hours watching tutorials on YouTube for Photoshop. I wish I knew how many hours of my life were spent behind a computer. It'd be a lot. It'd be a lot. But yeah, it's definitely just have a look on YouTube if there's anything that you want to know. Or you can message me if you want to send me a message on my website, or Instagram or anything like that. I'm happy to help with any kind of editing questions.
Yeah, and definitely check him out if you guys haven't. We talked about his website a little bit previously. Did you say the best places to follow you are Instagram and your website, or are there any other social medias people should check out?
I do have a Facebook as well, but I'd say that Instagram is probably the platform I'm most active on. But if you want to send me an email, that's probably best as well. But that's all on my website, and it's just adambirdphotography.com.
And if you want to check him out on Instagram, it's Adam Bird, YY. So Adam Birdie with 2 Ys. on
Yeah,
Instagram.
I missed out and someone else took Adam Bird.
Okay, Wade put that in the chat. Thanks, Wade.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, all I've done here is I've cut out the book from the other picture. And the only thing is that the curtain doesn't match up. So I've took an extra piece of the curtain here. And again, I'm just copying and pasting it over. And I'm going to mask it on in here just to get rid of the lantern.
Nice, yeah. It's cool to see how you're kind of taking, you know, the photos you do have, but just making them all work together, because that blending works really well.
Yeah, and hopefully no one will ever know. Hopefully that looks like the book was actually there.
Yeah, it looks seamless to me.
Great. So I'd say the next thing would be to get rid of this weird kind of brown box that was there. So the way that I could do that would be to start off with would be to just copy this area here and then paste it on over. So this again, like I love using the copy and paste tool. And I'll just flip it over to kind of match. And then if I start just by quickly painting over, I think what I might need to do with this as well is just darken it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll do that with curves and just bring it on down until I feel like it matches better.
Geez, it's so quick and it like already looks so good.
Yeah, it just helps blend it in. And what I did with the actual edit with this was I kind of put a book there to kind of hide it anyway. But just for kind of a quick kind of fix for it, I think that works well.
Now, are these things you consider ahead of time? Like, does it dictate the way you take the photos at all? Like, oh, I'll probably want to get rid of this, so I should have a clean shot of this area.
Yeah, that, and I also make sure that I just take loads of extra pictures, so I've always got that room to play around afterwards. But when I shot this, I knew that I didn't want that there, and I couldn't shoot that area without the box. So what I knew I was going to do is just copy and paste it over.
Jessica has a question. She says, could photography be a full-time job, and is it for you? Was it a full-time job when you first started out after graduating college?
No, so photography for me is something that I do. I'm self-employed, so I do photography freelance. And the thing for me is I also have a part-time job where I work 2 days a week, which isn't related to photography. And that mainly has helped me out this year with lockdown. Just because all my photo shoots have been pushed back or cancelled, it just kind of gives me that guaranteed income each month. But with photography, I guess it's just how you want to do it. For me, it always started out as a hobby, and it has turned into kind of a job and a career for me. But I never wanted it to be a sole thing for me, just because I love it so much. I wouldn't want to kind of ever wake up and think, oh, I'm dreading doing this, or this, I don't want to do this job, but I have to do it for money. Whereas that because I'm freelance, I get to kind of pick and choose a little bit on what jobs that I take on. But I guess each their own with that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I almost have to have like a certain balance between personal work and, you know, work that I'm doing for commission or freelance or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Maintain my sanity, I suppose.
Yeah, and I love creating work for myself as well. So I'd say a lot of my fantasy work is just personal work, but that's kind of what brings me a lot of jobs in. It's just showing people how I can create these kind of things. It leads to other things and loads of different jobs. So this is a lens flare picture that I actually took myself. And you can do this with anything. So you could just take a picture of your phone light on with your camera. This was actually took of a speed light going off, and I've just cropped it in. But yeah, you could take this with anything. You could shine a torch at your camera and you kind of have this nice lens flare effect. And this is something I've saved from years ago, and I've used it quite a lot on multiple pictures. So all you have to do is drag it on. And then I normally choose the screen option because that just removes all the darkness in the background. And the only other thing I'd probably do with this to kind of help it match the scene would be to add a color tint. So what I normally do is go to my hue and saturation, If I click colorize as well, it just means that I can kind of select over what kind of color I want. And I definitely want it to be more blue toned because that matches the dress and the curtains and then the overall vibe of it.
It's great when you can not have to deal with masking something out and a blending mode just takes care of it.
Yeah, it's the best. It's so great. And I'm going to add a blur to this as well.
Oh yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, it definitely looks better having a blur to it. I might just keep it quite subtle.
There was a period of time years ago before I got into art where I was doing like After Effects stuff and playing around with lightsaber effects, and just the glow and the coloration tweaking is just bringing me back to that.
All those memories. Great. So yeah, I really like how that's looking so far. So again, I'm just flattening my layers because I'm happy with how it's looking. And the next thing I'd probably do would be a dodge and burn on this. And that's mainly just because of the bottom here. I want it to kind of all blend together. And I feel like this side on the left is a lot darker than the side on the right. So again, I'm going to add my black and white adjustment layer just so that I'm not distracted by the colors. And I'm going to bring up curves then just so I can kind of adjust things. So I've just darkened that, and what I'm going to start doing is just painting on over here just to kind of make that darkness kind of blend in, and so it's all kind of seamless.
Yeah, it really balances it.
Yeah, I feel like that works better already.
Jessica wants to know if you feel like you need to go to college to be a photographer, how necessary that is.
I would say I've never come across a situation where someone's asked me for my college degree. And even though I do have one for photography, it's not something I've used. I mean, it's great to have, but I would definitely say you don't need to have a degree, and you don't need to go to college to become a photographer. I think the main thing is just having your portfolio. Your portfolio speaks for itself, really, and your work is what you put out there. So clients will book you depending on your work rather than if you've got a certain degree behind it.
How much stock do you put in social media? Because I've seen some photographers who are oftentimes found through their Instagram. Is this something you feel like you really put a lot of effort into? Do you feel like it's part of the job almost, or a priority to any degree?
Yeah, I do think it's important to be active on social media. I do try and go on it and probably post maybe once or twice a week, just to kind of keep that engagement with people who follow me. And also, I just feel I love kind of just putting out new work. And every time I create a new picture, it's kind of like, right, I'm on to the next one. And I'm already thinking of the next idea. But yeah, I definitely think it's important to just to be active on social media.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you've learned much about it? Because I actually was pretty late to the game in terms of Instagram, but it seems like sometimes there's a lot of like little tips and tricks and things to know. Is that something you feel like you've learned much about, or do you just kind of post and go back to work?
Well, with Instagram, especially recently, the algorithm's gone a little bit weird. So I don't feel like there's ever a good time to post, because sometimes your post can reach a load of people and sometimes they don't. I think now you have to kind of save people's pictures in order for them to kind of be put up on people's feeds, which is so weird. But I don't really have any rules to Instagram. I kind of don't have any kind of color scheme. I just kind of post everything on there. But everything is kind of fairy tale based, so it all just kind of sits together nicely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of times if you have a pretty distinct style in that way, I think the gallery and your social media feed and all that looks pretty cohesive on its own.
Yeah, no, I don't really have any rules to Instagram. I just post. I just post whatever I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's so tiring and difficult, I think, to try to keep up with that stuff to really like specific degree, like the details of the algorithm and all that stuff. But I find that, I mean, I need to be a lot better about this, but I find that the thing you're going to see across the board with all social media is that consistency helps the most, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, for Instagram, for me, I just love it. I think it's a great way of to see people's work, and it's something that you can just do easily, and you can just scroll through on your phone when you get 5 minutes just to have a look through. But no, I love using Instagram.
Yeah, I like Instagram because for me, it's nothing but art. Like my entire feed is just art. So, and I don't find it like a lot of social media, I think, tries to keep you in, it's like an addictive sort of thing. But Instagram, I'll get on, I'll scroll through, kind of see some art, like a bunch of pictures. And then I'll be like, all right, I'm done for now. I should, go do something else. So
yeah, I think it's good to have a break from it as well, and not be so much on social media all the time. But no, most of the people that I follow on Instagram as well are either photographers or artists or people who do similar kind of things. So it's just a great way of feeling inspired as well.
Yeah, definitely. Also, just a heads up to everyone, in about 20 minutes, we're going to be going over the daily creative challenges. So if anyone has one that's just about ready, definitely feel free to submit it on the Discord. We'll check it out, give it a look. And if you're not familiar with the daily creative challenges or the community Discord, go ahead and click that challenge tab above the chat there, and it'll give you all the information and links you need. Viola says, I can't stand to go on Instagram. I like it. I feel like it's one of my favorite social medias because I feel like it's just the healthiest. I don't know, because I just follow artists and everything. So it's nothing but art. There's not really like any addictive content or controversial content or whatever. It's just look at some good art, maybe leave a few comments, like a few things, and then, I don't feel like compelled to just scroll forever, which I think is where it can get dangerous.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's following good people. So always following people whose work makes you feel good or inspired. And yeah, it is essentially just like a load of different photographers for me. So I love going on it personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are my favorite sites. I mean, I kind of feel that way about like, ArtStation or really any gallery site like Behance. If you follow a bunch of good artists, you can just go on, you can see your feed, and it's just like a nice little boost of motivation and inspiration for the day.
Yeah, and I'd also see that the thing with Instagram is everything's so not so much on the feed because I only follow people that I really love the work of, but everything's so perfect. And I think sometimes it's just great to kind of get the reality of it as well. So I do try and be open on my stories about what I'm up to, because photography, it isn't all just going out and taking the picture. There's so much more to it as having it as a business. So yeah, it's kind of just showing every aspect of it rather than just kind of an image to portray to people.
Yeah, that's great, because I think that's one of the places Instagram kind of excels. Like we all have our gallery portfolio sites like Behance, for that I try to put my finished stuff and all that. But it's fun to see people put like sketches or, with photography, maybe some behind the scenes stuff is always really cool to see, to get like a good picture. So I think Instagram as a platform is pretty good with that, because it's not necessarily like a perfectly curated gallery all the time.
I think it's just fun to look through. That's how I find it.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things, like I said, is to see like process images. If it's photography and you can see all the source images they use in the breakdown, that's always like the posts that captivate me. Or if it's someone who did a painting and you can see the sketch, all the way through the finished. Those are really neat.
Almost like the before and after. I love seeing those. So with that there, all I've done is just added a layer mask and started to brush over. That just kind of helps it blend in with the smoke and just makes it look like it's actually there. Otherwise, if I didn't add that layer mask, it kind of just sits on top. Well, that just kind of helps it blend together well.
Yeah, like it's sinking into the smoke a little bit.
So this is the reality of how I do all these pictures with flying objects. It is literally just taking a bunch of pictures, throwing books in the air and even holding them, and just kind of I edit them in afterwards then.
That's great. Also, welcome in Steve. Steve Festus Casaboom is here. Good to see you.
Awesome.
Jessica asks, do you have any favorite learning resources and online meetup groups for photography that you can recommend?
Yeah, I actually have a Facebook group for photographers. It's called Surreal Photography of Adam Bird, and we have loads of people just post loads of different pictures on there. And if you ever need kind of a critique or if you want advice from people, everyone's quite active on there and does share like their opinions and feedback. But in kind of, I guess, in terms of learning, I would just look on YouTube, and I'd recommend Flern, because I've watched a lot of their tutorials and they're really helpful. But yeah, I'd just say just anything on YouTube really.
Yeah, there's just so many resources out there for anything you need to learn at this point. But Flern is great. He's been on Adobe Live quite a few times.
Yeah, he's awesome, and I just feel like they go so in depth with how they edit as well. So it's always good to watch and just kind of brush up on skills.
Ferry in chat asks, do I have to match the black and white levels of the subjects to the background? I assume he means like do you match the values of the images?
In what way was that? Sorry.
He said, do I have to match the black and white levels of the subject to the background? And what I assume he's talking about is like matching the levels, or sorry, the values of different photos that you're using.
Oh, so basically making sure the photos are the same kind of exposure.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, for me, I mean, I shoot everything on manual, so everything is pretty much the same. But I would say if your photo looks off, so here, for example, this book to me it looks too bright for the scene. I would just go on that layer and manually just darken it just so it kind of fits wherever it is in the frame. But for this, it depends on where you place it, because it might the coloring and the brightness of it will look better in certain areas. But I feel like if I was putting it here, it would need to be darker.
Yeah. I think that's a huge thing, is just matching lighting. I'd like to hear your opinion on this, but for me, what I always think really makes things fit together the most is lighting and perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are the two most important parts of doing compositing. It's getting the angle right and the perspective, because that's something, as much as you can try and edit, you can't so much, if something's not the right angle, like it's just not going to work, and you are going to have to go out and reshoot it. But lighting as well, that's the other most important part, because sometimes if you look at edits and if something looks off, it usually is the lighting and it just doesn't match. So my advice would be to either try and shoot everything on location if you can. If not, if you're planning a shoot, try and search for the stock that you're going to use beforehand, so you can kind of match that lighting while you're shooting.
Oh yeah, that's a really good idea. All kind of that pre-planning stage.
Yeah, it's definitely good to kind of get that idea in your head of what stock you're going to use, because if I was going to edit in, I don't like a lion, for example, it's always good to know what kind of angle you need or how much space in the picture, just all those kind of things for the composition as well.
Yeah, and one thing I see a lot in response to Ferry's question is I'm kind of on that topic of contrast and values and everything. I have noticed sometimes if people are using, let's say they have a subject in the foreground, some sort of creature or person or monster or whatever. I'm thinking about the daily creative challenges lately with this sort of spooky theme. And then you have a background. Sometimes I notice if people use a background that has really intense contrast, meaning the darks are really, really deep darks, but then the subject in the foreground closer to the camera, its darks don't go as deep. It looks off,
Yeah.
because if anything, due to atmospheric perspective, the stuff further back kind of gets a little bit of a haze or a fade to it. So you usually want the highest contrast in the front, but
Yeah.
just in general, yeah, you kind of need to match that value range, that contrast, for it to look like it's in the same scene.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And you can either try and do that in shooting, or with Photoshop, you could use curves to kind of match the contrast as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with levels, curves, any of those, it can be a really kind of quick fix to adjust those things.
Yeah. So what I've done here is I've made one of the books bigger in Photoshop, and I've added a blur to it as well. So this kind of just adds depth to the picture. And I feel like it helps with framing a lot as well, is I kind of like to put pictures just at the corner or just off frame slightly. And that just kind of brings your attention more into the picture, it engages people. Because I feel like if you didn't have any depth, it could be quite a flat looking picture. And this just kind of brings that interest in towards the main subject, which is the model.
Yeah, definitely. That looks great. It already adds like a certain element of depth.
Yeah, and I do it quite a lot in most of my pictures, to be honest. I always, if I can't do it in person, so if there's nothing there that I can frame the composition with, I will just do it in Photoshop afterwards.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's cool to see how you apply that to these images as well, because if I'm doing like any sort of scene, like a landscape, that's like kind of the number one compositional thing I'm thinking. I'm like, all right, I need a foreground, midground, background. But that's something I think you usually think about when you see bigger landscapes or wider shots, but it's really interesting to see how you apply that to, even fairly close up shots of like this little hut.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's just with the kind of editing that I do, I always make sure to take extra pictures of pretty much everything because you never know when you're gonna need something. So, for example, even editing in the book, that was kind of something because I thought of as I went along with this, and I didn't really see it coming together until I did the edit. And that's why I was like, right, I'm so glad that I took photos of the book in the window because it would have been so difficult to edit a book which was out like kind of in this setup to make it look like it was actually sitting on the window if it wasn't.
Just had to mute my mic as the street sweeper roars on by. Oh, thanks, Wade. Yeah, Wade put the Photoshop Discord link. So if anyone hasn't checked that out, definitely give it a look. It's a great community for submitting designs, getting feedback, and all that. So I'm curious, do you consider yourself like a photographer first or like a photo compositor first? Did you kind of start with one over the other and you feel like that's kind of how you think of what you do, or is it really just both of them evenly?
Yeah, I'd say that Photoshop for me, well, photography for me was just a way of kind of getting pictures to edit. I mean, I started off just editing random pictures that I had, and photography was just a way of getting those pictures so I could play around with them in editing. But now I guess I do love them just as much. But for me, the most of my like pictures come together while I'm editing. And I just find it so much fun just playing around in Photoshop and seeing what the different kind of angles and the different kind of things I can add to it to make a story. So no, I would say a bit of a mix. With this kind of work, I do class myself as some kind of compositor because I couldn't really finish a photo without editing. It wouldn't feel right to me. But I do other styles of photography. So I do weddings. And with that, I don't really do any editing. So I don't do any kind of books at a wedding. I don't edit in magical animals or anything like that. And to me, that's how I feel. I feel just as much as a photographer either way. To me, it's all about like the end product and what it looks like rather than the steps it took to get there.
Yeah, definitely. That actually makes me think, though, I wonder if there are many styles of photographers out there who do kind of add these elements into their wedding photography, like kind of giving it a almost sort of fairy tale or pushed feel, you know what I mean? Combining compositing in with like the reality that everyone typically has, and that'd be kind of cool to see.
Yeah, that would be cool. I've done some weddings and a lot of my jobs are booked through this. So people would say to me, I've brought smoke bombs along at weddings and people would kind of just want them to have that fairy tale vibe. But I would never go so far to kind of change how the day was. I kind of just like to photograph that as it's there. And with this area is just like my playtime. It's pretty much the time where I can do whatever I want. And yeah, if I want to make the picture look crazy, then I can do.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people probably want their wedding photos to be fairly rooted in the reality of what actually happened in the day.
Yeah. I think it's important to capture what's there as well. So this is the kind of I guess this is why I kind of love having the juxtaposition of both of them. And this for me is a chance where I can just experiment and see what looks good.
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely nice to have that, like, a little bit of variety to the work you do, because I find that when I do too much of one thing, the other's kind of nice, and when I do too much of that, it's nice to bounce back and forth.
Yeah, and the thing with this kind of photography for me, it takes so much planning and so much kind of thought has to go into it. Whereas with wedding photography is like a complete different ball game. That's turning up somewhere on the day and not necessarily knowing what to expect, and you're just kind of expected to work with it. Whereas with this, I was like, everything is planned. So I plan the location, I plan the props, I try and plan the lighting as well. So I would take the photos at a certain time of day. So yeah, I definitely have a lot more control over how the picture looks when I'm doing fairy tale and fantasy kind of work.
Mm-hmm. And kind of on the topic, the previous topic of, like, do you consider yourself a photographer, a compositor? I think it is a really, like, natural transition. If you're someone out there who is really into photo compositing, it does seem like a really great kind of segue into, trying to take your own photos and trying to think about what would be a cool photo composite to do, and, maybe incorporating some of your own photography into that. So it definitely seems like kind of a natural extension.
Yeah, and I feel like if you took the photo, you are a photographer, whether you edit quite a lot to it to get to the final picture. So yeah, I would definitely say you're still a photographer, even if you edit a lot. It's just kind of that's the process that I take. And even back in the day, if people still do film photography, like going in the darkroom is essentially a style of editing. It's still a kind of Photoshop in an old way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everyone has their own processes and techniques, and I guess it's just whatever works for each person on their own.
Yeah, definitely. Steve says, I live in a middle of a huge industrial zone inside a factory. Yeah, I'm broadcasting from a very busy factory right now. My secret is out. I always joke about living in an art cave. For all you know, Steve, I'm in a literal art cave.
You never
away
know.
From the world. We have good internet here, but you wouldn't think caves would, but I made it work.
All I can hear is my dog barking. There's fireworks going off today, so she's just barking quite a lot.
Are they going off now?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear them.
I can't, no.
Okay, that's good.
Dog's just trying to warn you, like, we're under attack. What are you doing?
She's so scared. Bless her.
Yeah, I don't think dogs and fireworks aren't always the best of friends.
No, mine isn't, definitely not. So yeah, I'm just removing the tattoo, and I do love Debbie's tattoo. I think it's great. But for this kind of setup, I feel like it's distracting rather than adding anything to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is a time where I do a little bit of retouching as well. So for me, I kind of like to do this quite softly. I don't do anything too intense. And I don't like to kind of change the way someone looks. To me, it's just kind of an overall kind of brush stroke over. So what I do is I normally use the clone tool and use it on a lower opacity. So maybe 20 to 30 normally works well. So I'll put it at 25. And what I like to do is just source a light area of the skin. And then I will just click, let me untick this here. And this just means that the source stays in the same area. And I'm just going to click over. And to me, this just softens the lighting a lot. So if I show before and after, it just kind of makes everything look that little bit more soft.
That's interesting. I don't know if I've seen people use the clone stamp at like a low opacity in that way.
Yeah, that's something that I've done for years, and it just means rather than changing like anything about the model's face, I feel like this just improves the lighting. So almost like the dodge and burn again. So this just makes the lighting look a lot more soft and like it was hitting nicer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also I don't do really any photo retouching, but I remember Paul Tranny, one of our streamers, uh, often gives the advice when retouching like any blemishes or anything, saying if it's something that will be gone within like a week or so, you know, he removes it. But if it's something that's more permanent,
Yeah.
like a mole or some sort of, you know, mark on the face that's just part of who they are, he likes to leave that in, which I always thought was
Yeah,
good advice.
I completely agree with that. I think the only way it kind of crosses over with this style of photography is that I'm essentially kind of capturing a character rather than like an accurate representation of a person.
Yeah.
So to me, like this is my friend Debbie, but also this could be a character in a magical world. Um, so if I did want to change anything, I probably wouldn't mind too much on this. But if I was doing a kind of like a portrait shoot, I wouldn't change anything, such as things that are there permanently.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like the difference of retouching a model's photos that's representing who that model is rather than creating almost like a sort of illustration.
Yeah, totally. So again, I just go really softly with that. I don't think I've done anything too intense. It just kind of makes the lighting look a little bit nicer.
Also, just a heads up to anyone in chat, if you do want to get any of those daily creative challenges in, we're just about to go over those in a minute or so. So submit them now if you haven't into the Discord, and we're going to take a look pretty soon. And Adam, of course, whenever you find a good like little resting point, we can switch over.
Okay, awesome. I'll just make these layers here and then I should be okay. Yeah, I'm good whenever you are.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So we're going to be going over the daily creative challenges. Let me see. What was today's? Let me pop that up. And today's challenge, I believe, is, let's see, we have filters and effects. So it says, play with filters to add a pixel sorting effect to an image. So those are the ones we're going to be going over today. And thanks for sharing that, Wade. Wade put the Discord link in the chat, so definitely give that a look if you haven't. Also, if you go to the challenges page, you can see all the challenges that have been done so far for this week. And if you scroll down below, you'll see all the previous week's challenges. So they're all cataloged there if you want to check them out. All right, so here we are. I'm going to scroll through these some so you can kind of see what people have been working on. Super cool challenges, great styles to these. I caught a little bit of Voodoo Val's stream this morning, checking out the sort of magic stone effect everyone's got going on. So these are great. All right, let's go down. We'll start from the bottom with Ponga Head, the Stone of Strength. I like it. Great colors in this. Yeah, this is really cool. The font works really well. It's kind of almost like a sort of fantasy thing. I really like the texture and the I don't know if this was added or if this was part of the photo, but this like little shadow here adds a lot of nice depth. And then Hatta Gospel. Ooh, it's more like a space themed one, which is really neat. Yeah, I like this. I like the font you chose. It definitely kind of goes with that sort of like, I don't know, it's almost like a mix between kind of fantasy theming and kind of sci-fi look to me, which I think is really cool. But I like how you turn this into a sort of meteor type image. Great colors too. We got Frank with a couple designs here. So this is the day 8 filters and effects. Oh, okay. So this is the original images used. He shows the source images here. And then the design. So let's see. I left all my spooky mood in last week's challenge. I feel more mummy hunter for now. Nice. This is a really cool effect. This is kind of the pixely sort of effect. It's interesting because it's like a mix between a sort of digitized effect and almost kind of melty looking. Some sort of like digital melting effect. But great contrast against the background. I think the white and then the colorful face here, the sort of sarcophagus head looks really good. Background definitely is really nice. I love how you themed that the same way with the hieroglyphics, but like heavy texture to it too. Yeah, it certainly has a very kind of like Halloween-y, spooky mood, a little bit surreal with all those effects. Really good stuff, Frank. It's always cool to see what Frank's putting out. We got Key with another stone here. I like it. I like seeing all the color variations in these stones. The Eye of Fenrir. Very nice. Yeah, you got some good texture going. Texture contrasting effects here too, but really nice colors, really nice texture contrast. Let's check out Fairies. Fairy was actually in chat. I think he was asking one of the questions. Fairy does a lot of these challenges, so it's always cool to see what he's putting out as well. I like it. This definitely has like a very kind of intensely stylized and sort of surreal feel, which I think is really neat. I really like the texture contrast, Fairy, that you added too. I'm not sure if you're in Fairy's in chat right now, but the sharpness of these sort of like kind of waterfall tears type effects contrasts the softness of everything else, which really draws focus to there, which I think works well.
I think that's really cool. I can only just see this now. I couldn't see them a minute ago. But yeah, I really like how it's been cut out well around the nose as well.
Yeah,
like all of the colors go to work together so well.
Yeah, the masking is pretty interesting. Adds a little bit of depth. But yeah, I love the color gradient that you got on this. Super cool feel to it. If you missed the other ones, Adam, I can just kind of scroll through them real quick so you can kind of see what the challenges are today.
Oh, that's really cool. I love the space theme that's going on in that.
Yeah, I like the way you handled that. This was the one.
Cool.
This was the one by Frank. I'll show you the source photos too.
Oh no way! That's really cool. That's awesome. So, what kind of filters were used for those?
Yeah, I think that was some of the challenge today. It was kind of a, what was it called? Let me see the title of it again. Play with filters to add a pixel sorting effect.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. Yeah, so. Okay, so we did Fairies, then we got Jay Lewis up next with the Stone of Peace.
That's cool. I really like the texture as well on there.
Yeah, there's some really great textures in all of these, like the background textures that people are using, the stone texture, it all has a really nice contrast. The stylization of the text works super well too. I like that. It's kind of like playful, interesting looking. H. Johnny, this was the previous day challenge here.
Oh, cool. Yeah, from yesterday.
Yeah.
Demon Dog. I love it.
Demon Dog of the Night. If seen, run. I love this. This is great. I like this sort of a little flourish here in the corners, that kind of classic, elegant look to it. The little border works really well too. That's a nice touch. Yeah, I think this looks great. I like how you added like a very subtle color contrast to the background too, because everything's got a sort of yellowish sepia tone to it, but you seem to add this little bit of like purple tint to the flourish designs in the corners, the text, and even the background. And I think that, one, it gives it a really cohesive look because it all feels very unified in essentially the two colors that you have, but it adds a nice bit of contrast too. It's like a very subtle yellow purple contrast, which works. Mark Allen up next with today's challenge for pixel sorting. Yeah, I love seeing the effects people got with these stones.
Yeah, with the colors, it looks so good.
Yeah, the color shifts look great, the textures, and then kind of everyone's theming it based off their rock. So this is the strawberry limestone. I don't think you should eat this one, but it sounds tempting. And then we got Ant for the day 8 challenge, magic stone. Ooh, I like this.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, like these textures are so different, but this one, I mean, this looks really believable and interesting. It just, the colors work really well. Yeah, and then the textures on the background are a nice contrast to this one too. It's like a lot more sharp. Kind of stands out nicely. And then we got Gray Ghost up next. This is a previous day's challenge. I think we saw a couple from these on the other day. Kind of the monster running across the street.
I love the eyes.
Yeah, that's good. I like how it's got a little bit of depth too. The eyes recede back, like, you know, into the background a little bit more as well, which is cool. But this sort of smoky effect looks good. I don't know if he's supposed to be just kind of moseying across, but he almost seems to be kind of walking, and maybe that's what you're going for. But if you wanted to get a bit of like a motion effect, I think a little bit of a softer edge on the trailing end of the wolf would look good. Also, maybe, I mean, this looks like a standing wolf, so maybe that's what you want. But if it was a running one, I think that blur effect would work pretty well. But it almost looks like his foot's cut off a little bit here. I don't know if this was like a wolf in grass, but I think you could probably almost manually put it in just so it looks like it has a little bit of a foot, or if it kind of tapered off into a softer edge, it might look a little bit more ghost-like, like it's floating. So maybe just softening that edge would be a nice effect. And then we got diagonally with the zombie. She says, feedback, please. Very nice. This is a really interesting font. It's kind of almost like, I feel like I've seen this one before. Maybe this was in a previous design of hers, but it's almost like slightly UFO looking to me. It's almost alien-like in a way. But I think this this image you chose, or whatever filters or effects you applied to it, I think works well. Just the way it's desaturated, it kind of has almost like a sort of graphite look to it. I don't know. I think it depends what you're going for, because right now, I think the clean look of it is pretty interesting, and the font that you chose looks like it's kind of intentional in that way. But the image that we're seeing is very kind of gritty and rough. So I think just pushing it whichever direction you really want. If this is supposed to be like zombies and creepy, I think a texture on the background could look really good, a sort of rough, worn texture, and maybe even masking out this photo with a rough brush to make it look like it's not a perfectly clean edge. Because if this was drawn on traditionally, you know, it's kind of like that classic poster where an artist did a pencil etching or sketch or whatever. I think maybe making it feel a little bit more rough would look good. This perfectly clean edge looks a little more structured, but you know, if that's what you're going for, I think that works. Just something to think about. And then MacMatt, I don't know, I think I saw this design. I don't know if you saw it, but this is a business card design that I thought was really cool. And they put it into a mock-up image here, which is great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I really like the picture inside of the text as well.
Yeah, that's what I was saying yesterday a little bit. Like it gives it a lot of, I mean, both texture and color contrast, which works great. There's just a ton of contrast, right? Really draw on your eye here. And the mock-up, I think, looks great. This is really good. The perspective and everything looks really nice.
Yeah, it looks really natural.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more of these. So let's take a look at Dorina's challenge. Looks like this is a amended one. There's some changes made for this. I think this is looking solid. Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to see actual text here. I think I saw some people like copying and pasting, or what I assume was copying and pasting from like Wikipedia, or if you can find some sort of description on werewolves somewhere. I think having actual text is always a really nice touch. But overall, I think this works really nicely. The background texture is excellent. Kind of that parchment feel. The balance of everything here visually, I think looks really nice. So this is great. I'm not sure what changes you made, Dorina, but I think this is looking really good. Nice job. Oh, okay, so this is Leslie posting some of the photos that were composited. Very nice. Maedi is up next with the information cards. This is the day 7 challenge. Same thing with the sort of monster card. This is cool.
Yeah, I really like the colors on this one.
Yeah, definitely eye-catching for sure. Yeah, font looks good. Texture's really cool. I kind of like how you it's like you masked out the moon shape here, and you use the texture from the background, which is a nice touch. I think that kind of like ties it together a little bit, which is really cool to see. Yeah, good job. I think we have time for one more here. Oh, okay. So this was an edit. They posted this mock-up before, but the card was the same black that was used in the original design. So I was saying for this really bright scene, even if it's a black card, it should be a little bit lighter, you know, like tones of gray. And I think they nailed it here. I think this is looking really solid.
I think it looks really natural. Yeah, it blends in really well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of a trick that's easy to overlook is if you have a black object, a lot of times if you put it in intense lighting, you may think that, you know, it'll be the same thing. But even then, giving it a little bit of brightness kind of fits it in with the scene nicely. So that looks great, Zuzana. Great job. And I think that's a good place to call it. We can jump back over to Adam's screen and kind of put any final touches you want before we got to jump off for today.
Yeah.
And of course, if anyone has any questions for Adam before we do have to jump off for today, definitely put them in chat and I'll read them and check them out, and I can field anything that you ask to Adam.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so for this, I'm just adding the dodge and burn again. And this is what I do pretty much at the end of each picture. And for this, it's kind of the way I like to think of dodge and burn is almost instructing people's eyes on where to look. So even though this is very bright at the top here, I want the main focus to be on the model. And so I'm just going to start by painting over with a low opacity brush. I might bump it up to 20, but just to kind of bring up the lightness. Hold on, I think I've named my dodge and burn layers the wrong ones. Let me have a look. Let me just see. Let's have a look. Yeah. There we go.
Honestly, I think things like dodge and burn and just changing the lighting is such a powerful tool for composition, because I even do that with my own paintings. And if something doesn't look like it's fitting together, like we were talking about before, lighting and perspective are huge. It's just such a quick and easy way to like unify things, and lighting does such a great job of making things look like they're in the same scene.
Yeah, totally.
But even like you said too, drawing the eye, I use multiply and color dodge the same way, but really focusing in on where you want the viewer to look. Like right now, she has such great contrast.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm aiming for, really, is to just, I don't want any of this background area. So when I'm looking at this now, it looks so bright from what I've done already. I just don't want it to distract from the picture. So I'm just going to keep painting around the edges here, almost like a vignette, basically, just to kind of draw people in. So that's, even though it literally took probably about a minute to do that, I feel like that makes a huge difference in how the picture looks.
Yeah, that's completely different. And that's great that you can, do something like that so quickly.
Yeah, and then I'll probably would just bring down the opacity as well, just so it doesn't look so harsh. But to me, I always do that on the end of each picture, and I feel like it makes a massive difference.
It's funny because I think I pretty much have the same exact thing in my own workflow. That's like one of the later things I do to really like, okay, now it's kind of working more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel pretty happy with that as a whole. There probably wouldn't be much else that I would do with it apart from colors. So again, what I'm going to do is save it and then bring it on into Lightroom and do like the final color tweaks there.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I can see, like you said, you take, sometimes around an hour on these things, and I can see some photos. It's not too involved. It's putting like you did you edited the background, you did the wand
Yeah,
effect, some of the books, some value adjustments.
I think mainly it's just like taking one step at a time, because it can be quite daunting at first to kind of, there's so much to edit, but if you just focus on one section and then just carry on, the process gets a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Marcia asks if you sketch out your ideas first.
Yeah, sometimes I either write them down or I sketch them, but I'm not very good at drawing. So usually it looks nothing like the sketch, but to me, I kind of know the sketch that I draw because I'm not very good at drawing. I know what it looks like in my head. So yeah, to put it bluntly, yeah, I do sketch out my drawings, my ideas.
Yeah, I mean, even with, I do drawing and painting completely. Like I do a lot of visualizing too. Like I do try to picture the scene I have inside my head before I ever draw it down. It can be tough because sometimes it's more of an abstract idea, but I think really taking some time to visualize and sketch things out, it helps a lot when you're actually trying to execute.
Yeah, it just makes things a lot clearer as well.
So I like to ask this question sometimes. Would there be any sort of advice you would give to yourself when you're starting out, if you could? Like, are there any things you wish you had done differently, or things you feel like maybe you wouldn't have done or would have done more of when learning initially?
Um, I wish I kind of just had more patience with myself because a lot of the times I feel like if something's not working, I can just give up. But I think a big part of it is just, you know what, even if something's not working, you kind of learn from it. So I've done a bunch of shoots where it's just gone totally wrong and it's not worked out how I wanted, but I kind of take something from it from each shoot and I'm like, okay, next time I do a shoot, this is how I'm going to do it differently. So I would say just the best kind of advice would just to be practice as much as you can. If it's with a model or even just with friends, or even just a self-portrait, just practice as much as you can. Because I still do it now. And every time I take a picture or I do something, I normally find like a new technique that I really like doing. So yeah, I'd just say you never really stop learning, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. Good advice. Yeah, I feel like I was kind of like that a lot in the beginning. I would sometimes be afraid to try certain things. I would avoid certain things almost out of this like subconscious fear of not wanting it to turn out bad, because then I would have to be like not as good as I want to think I am.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
and I think it's like you just said, you always learn from it. The more you do things, the more you're going to be like, oh, this worked, this didn't. So it's just that experience.
Yeah, totally. I feel like my computer is going very slow at the moment. Let me just reopen Lightroom. I think I shut it down then by accident.
Oh yeah, no problem. Do you have, I don't know if we asked this yesterday, but do you have a favorite photo that you've done? Is there something that kind of stands out in your head?
Um, for me, normally it's the last picture I created.
Mm-hmm.
That's normally how I feel. But like in my portfolio, I think the one that kind of sticks out to me was a Beauty and the Beast picture I did where I put a model inside of a glass jar.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of put petals and all of the things flying around. And for me, that was a kind of one of the first times that I planned a photo and it kind of went exactly how I had in mind. Um, so yeah, I'll see if I can get it up actually while Lightroom's loading.
Yeah, if you all haven't seen his website, definitely check it out. I think it's like one of the first photos on your website, but that's a great one. I love that one.
Yeah, thank you. It's one that means a lot to me because it was something that I planned out and it went great. And not all photo shoots go like that. So it was one of those times where I was like, I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, and the one I think it's think it's loading now on the very right with the boat. That's such a great photo too.
Yeah, thank you. And that was taken at a workshop. And with that as well, to be honest, there wasn't much Photoshop that went on with that picture. It was pretty much straight out of camera. I think the only things that I really did was the dodge and burn again to kind of get that soft lighting. And it was also just editing the colors. But that one was pretty much straight out of camera. Whereas this one, the Beauty and the Beast style picture, took a little bit more time in editing. And I took the glass jar on location with me, and I took photos of it to kind of blend it all together afterwards.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I think we're at a good stopping point. If you just want to kind of recap what you've done today, let people know, of course, where they can find you online, any social medias to follow.
Yeah, so if you want to follow me online or any kind of platform, the best one is my website, which is adambirdphotography.com. Or check out my Instagram, which is adambirdie, and that's got 2 Y's on it. And if anyone's got any questions that they haven't asked today, or just want to speak to me about anything, please just feel free to send me a message, and I'll be happy to help with any editing questions.
Awesome. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. I'm seriously a huge fan of your work. I love the style that you get and the feel that you get in your images. So being able to kind of see how you approach it and pick your brain a little bit has been really great. So huge thanks. Yeah, huge thanks for joining us. And of course, everyone in chat, thanks for joining as well. Anyone who's chatting or lurking or just being here, we do much appreciate it. Adam, thanks again. We're going to call it a day for now. Definitely stick around. We have more streams coming up next. But Adam, thanks for being here, and chat, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, bye.